At 30, I thought I had it all. The successful career, the house straight out of a magazine, and the handsome, doting husband, Ethan. My life was perfect, or so it seemed. For my birthday, in front of all our friends and family, my own sister, Haley, stood beside my husband, placed a hand over her stomach, and gave me a triumphant sneer. "We're having a baby," she announced. "We're a family now." They stood there, waiting for me to shatter, expecting a storm of tears. They had no idea I was holding a single devastating truth that would turn their perfect announcement into absolute ash. My revenge wasn't going to be messy, it was going to be meticulous. Follow my story to see how I dismantled their world, piece by piece. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with what you think their punishment should be. The air in our home was thick with the scent of peonies and expensive champagne. From the expansive living room, I could see the city lights of downtown glittering like a fallen constellation against the twilight sky. It was my 30th birthday, and by all accounts I was the woman who had everything. The party was a testament to that fact, a curated guest list of attractive, successful people mingling in a home that had been featured in a local design magazine. My husband, Ethan, moved through the crowd with an easy grace that had first captivated me years ago. He was an artist at this, making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. He caught my eye from across the marble island in the kitchen, raising his glass in a silent toast. I smiled back, a practiced, perfect motion that didn't quite reach the hollow space in my chest. For months, our picture-perfect life had felt like a movie set I was wandering through. The touches were brief. The kisses landed on my cheek more often than my lips, and his laughter seemed to have an echo, as if it were coming from a great distance. Everyone else saw Ethan, the charming husband. I saw a man who had been slowly, methodically, backing away from our marriage. The gilded cage was beautiful, but the bars were cold and very, very real. "Claire, you've really outdone yourself," my friend Morgan said, squeezing my arm. "You two are the ultimate power couple." I smiled again. "We try." The lie tasted like ash. Just as the caterer brought out a fresh tray of prosciutto-wrapped figs, my sister arrived. Haley didn't walk into a room, she made an entrance. Her dress was a shade of red that demanded attention, cut just a little too low. "Happy birthday, sis," she chirped, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a vice grip. She smelled of a cloyingly sweet perfume. It must be nice to have the budget for all this. It was a classic Haley line. Venom laced with sugar. She'd spent a lifetime living in my shadow, and her jealousy had sharpened into a weapon she wielded with surgical precision. I let it slide as I always did. "I'm glad you could make it, Haley." Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Ethan. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. She glided over to him, placing a hand on his forearm that lingered far too long. They leaned in, sharing a private joke. I saw the flash of intimacy in their shared glance, a secret language I wasn't privy to. It was a performance they had perfected, just subtle enough to be denied, but blatant enough to be a message directed squarely at me. The guests saw a charming brother-in-law and his friendly sister-in-law. I saw the two people who were systematically dismantling my life. An hour later, the gentle hum of conversation was abruptly cut short by the sharp tap of a spoon against a champagne flute. Haley stood in the center of the room, beaming, with Ethan standing stiffly by her side. He looked pale under the warm lighting. His smile stretched thin. "Could I have everyone's attention, please?" Haley's voice was bright and clear. "I just want to make a little toast for the birthday girl." A few people clapped politely. Haley's eyes found mine across the room, and her smile turned into a triumphant sneer. "But first," she continued, placing a hand protectively over her stomach, "Ethan and I have some personal news we're so excited to share with all of you. We're pregnant." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The silence was deafening. I could feel every eye pivot towards me, 100 pinpricks of pity and morbid curiosity. Haley savored the moment, letting the shock settle before delivering the final, killing blow. She tightened her grip on Ethan's arm and looked directly at me. "We're a family now." The world didn't blur. My heart didn't break. The initial shock was a shard of ice sliding into my veins, but it was followed by something else entirely. A cold, hard wave of pure clarity. They expected me to collapse, to run from the room in a storm of tears. They had no idea I had been waiting for this. My movements were slow, deliberate. I set down my untouched canopy. I picked up my champagne flute, the crystal cool against my skin. The light caught the diamond of my wedding ring, and for a moment, it flashed like a warning signal. I pushed through the stunned crowd, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor until I stood before them. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. Haley's face was a mask of smug victory. I raised my glass. My voice, when it came, was calm and steady, carrying through the silent room with chilling precision. "Wow," I said, a small, controlled smile on my lips. "News like that certainly deserves a proper toast." Paused, letting the tension build. To Ethan. And to Haley. I looked from his ashen face to her glowing one. "There's just one tiny complication in your beautiful story." I took a delicate sip of champagne before continuing. "You see, my husband was diagnosed with obstructive azoospermia 3 years ago, during our fertility consultations. For those of you who don't know, it means his sperm count is 0. He's sterile." I let the clinical, brutal words hang in the air. "I have the medical reports, of course. Dated and signed by Dr. Albright at the Westside Clinic. So, by all means, let's raise a glass to the happy couple. And to their miracle baby." Chaos erupted. Haley's triumphant expression dissolved into sheer, unadulterated terror. Her face went white, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Ethan finally looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. "That's not true," he stammered, his voice cracking. I was looking into a reversal. The lie was so weak, so pathetic, it was almost laughable. The room exploded into a frantic murmur of whispers. Guests started backing away from them as if they were a contagion. I saw Morgan staring, her hand over her mouth in disbelief. I ignored them all. My focus was on the two people whose world had just shattered. I reached into my clutch, but instead of pulling out a tissue to dab non-existent tears, I produced a single polished brass key. I walked to the marble island where Ethan stood frozen and placed it deliberately on the counter. The metallic sound was sharp and final. "My lawyer will be in touch," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. And with that I turned around. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked calmly through my guests, past the peonies, and out the front door of the house I had built. I left them all behind, standing in the ruins of my 30th birthday party. The night air was cool on my skin, and for the first time in a very long time I could finally breathe. The sterile silence of the hotel suite was a balm after the chaos of the party. The room was all clean lines, muted colors, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering the same stunning view of the city as Ethan's house, but from a different angle. A new perspective. I had booked it 2 weeks ago under my maiden name. My hands weren't shaking as I pulled my phone from my clutch. The emotional storm had passed months ago, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I scrolled past the dozens of incoming notifications, missed calls from Ethan, Haley, my mother, and found the number I needed. She answered on the second ring. "Jax," I said. "Claire." Jacqueline Jax Russo's voice was exactly as I remembered from our consultation. Sharp, efficient, and completely devoid of sentiment. "I take it the party's over." "You could say that." "It went exactly as we discussed," I replied, sinking into a plush armchair. "Public announcement. Multiple witnesses. It's done." "Good," Jax said. There was a sound of furious typing. "I'm filing the petition for dissolution of marriage first thing Monday morning. Citing adultery. Your public affidavit will be attached. I'm also filing an ex parte motion to freeze all joint assets, including the brokerage accounts and the 401k. By the time he wakes up, his credit cards won't work." There was no hint of celebration in her voice, only the grim satisfaction of a job well done. "He has no idea what's coming," I said quietly. They never do, Jax replied. Get some rest, Claire. The demolition has just begun. I didn't have to be in the house to know what was happening. I could picture it perfectly. The leftover champagne flutes and half-eaten hors d'oeuvres bearing witness to a war zone. My departure hadn't ended the drama. It had merely lit the fuse. Based on a string of increasingly frantic texts from my father, who had spoken to a hysterical Haley, their united front had crumbled into dust within minutes. I pictured Ethan. His charming facade stripped away to reveal the panicked, cornered man beneath. The love he'd professed for my sister had curdled into pure fury. Who is it, Haley? I imagined him screaming, his voice echoing in the cavernous living room. You blew up my life. You blew up everything. Who is the father? Haley's response, my father relayed, was a torrent of tearful, incoherent denials and deflections. But the truth was a cornered animal, and Ethan was no longer in the mood for games. Their grand romance, the one they had sacrificed our family for, was revealed to be nothing more than a fragile alliance of ego and deceit. It couldn't survive the first brush with consequence. I switched my phone to silent and stared out at the city lights. People would call my reaction at the party cold. Sociopathic, even. They didn't see the nights of silent tears that had preceded it. They didn't see the moment the grief had burned away, leaving something harder and more useful in its place. Started 9 months ago. I was searching for old tax documents in Ethan's home office and found a folder misfiled under household warranties. Inside was a single medical report from 3 years prior. The letterhead was from the West Side Fertility Clinic. And the diagnosis was clear. Obstructive azoospermia. Sperm count 0. First I didn't understand. He told me the tests came back fine, that the issue must be with me. But the paper in my hands didn't lie. That single discovery was the loose thread. I pulled, and the entire tapestry of our marriage unraveled. The late nights at the office, suddenly aligned with credit card statements showing charges from boutique hotels across town. The business trips he took alone. I hired a private investigator who, for a modest fee, confirmed my deepest fear in less than 48 hours with a single grainy photograph. Ethan and Haley, kissing outside a restaurant, looking for all the world like a couple. The pain was physical, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. Cried for a week. Then one morning I woke up and the tears were gone. My grief had calcified into a cold, diamond-hard purpose. I wouldn't just leave. I would wait. I would let them build their fantasy on a foundation of lies, and I would be the one to kick it out from under them when the fall was highest. I met with Jax, planned, waited. My mother called the next morning. Her tone was one of deep, pained disappointment, all of it directed at me. Claire, your sister is a complete wreck, she began, foregoing any greeting. You humiliated her. You humiliated the entire family. She slept with my husband and lied about the father of her child at my birthday party. I said, my voice flat. I think the humiliation started there. She's fragile. You know that. And Ethan made a mistake, but you two built a life together, she pleaded. Can't you find it in your heart to be the bigger person here? For the sake of the family. For the sake of the family. The phrase she had used my entire life to guilt me into cleaning up Haley's messes. The family you're referring to doesn't exist anymore, Mom, I said, and for the first time I felt no guilt. I'm hanging up now. An hour later my father called. His voice was gravelly. I just got off the phone with your mother. Don't listen to a word she says. I'm disgusted, Claire. With both of them. I've already told Haley she's not welcome in my home until she figures out how to be a decent human being. Whatever you need, you let me know. I'm on your side. The line had been drawn. The family had fractured right down the middle. The final, pathetic piece of the puzzle came that afternoon, via my father. Ethan, in a rage, had apparently shaken the truth out of Haley. The biological father wasn't some dashing, romantic rival. It wasn't a passionate affair that had swept her off her feet. It was Brad from marketing. Brad. A 20-something junior account manager at Ethan's firm. A goofy, sycophantic kid Ethan had openly mocked at company dinners for his ill-fitting suits and desperate-to-please attitude. Haley had apparently slept with him once, at a happy hour after-party, in a moment of drunken, pathetic need for validation. The affair with my husband had been the cover. The child wasn't the product of some grand love, but of a sordid, meaningless one-night stand with a subordinate Ethan despised. I leaned my head back against the chair, a small, grim smile touching my lips. It was more perfect than I could have ever planned. Ethan hadn't just lost his wife and his reputation. He had been made a fool of publicly and irrevocably, by my sister and a man he considered a nobody. The demolition was right on schedule. 2 months passed. The initial shockwave of the party had subsided, replaced by the steady, rhythmic work of rebuilding. I had moved into a sleek, modern apartment downtown with a view of the bridge instead of the suburbs. It was smaller than the house, but every inch of it was mine, paid for with my own money, filled with furniture I chose, unburdened by the ghosts of a shared past. Freed from the emotional dead weight of my marriage, my focus at work became laser-sharp. At the architecture firm, I poured my energy into a competitive proposal for the new Riverside Museum complex. I worked late, not out of distraction, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The day we won the contract, my boss called me into his office, beaming. "Claire, your vision for the central atrium was the clincher. This is going to put you on the map." Standing in my own quiet apartment that evening, a glass of wine in hand, I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I was building an empire of my own on the ashes of the one that had been torched. The news of Ethan's downfall came in fragments. Jax would forward me professional updates. Clients from his design firm were pulling their contracts, citing reputational risk. My father would mention with grim satisfaction that Ethan had become a social pariah. Old friends were suddenly busy when he called. Then, one evening, he broke through the wall of silence I had erected. A voicemail left from a blocked number. His voice was almost unrecognizable. Not the smooth, confident baritone I knew, but a thin, desperate plea. "Claire, please. I know you won't pick up. But I need you to know. I'm ruined. Everything is falling apart. I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. I was a fool. Please. We can't let it end like this. Just talk to me." I listened to the message once, my expression unchanging. Felt nothing. No pity, no anger, not even a flicker of satisfaction. It was like listening to a weather report from a distant country. I saved the audio file and forwarded it to Jax with a simple subject line. "For your records." Haley's world had shrunk to the 4 walls of our childhood bedroom. My father told me she had moved back in with our mother, her belly swelling, her face pale and perpetually tear-streaked. Brad from marketing, through his lawyer, had vehemently denied paternity until a DNA test proved otherwise, after which he offered a monthly child support payment that wouldn't cover the cost of diapers. He wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. Ethan, of course, had kicked her out of the house weeks ago, changing the locks and refusing to take her calls. She was jobless, friendless, and facing single motherhood with nothing but our mother's suffocating pity for comfort. One afternoon she called me. It was the first time I had heard her voice since the party. It was stripped of all its usual confidence. "Claire," she whimpered. I need help. Have nothing. There are doctor's bills. Things for the baby. I'm begging you." I let the silence sit for a moment before I spoke, my voice calm and even. "When you stood in my living room and announced you were starting a family with my husband, you made a choice, Haley. You wanted that life. The consequences that come with it are yours to manage. But you have so much," she cried. "What I have," I said, my voice turning to ice, "I earned. And none of it is for you." I ended the call and blocked her number for good. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning with the subject line, "Ethan Cole, a mutual interest." I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me click. The message was from a man named David Chen. He introduced himself as Ethan's former business partner from a failed tech venture, years before I had even met him. He wrote that he'd heard about the messy divorce through the grapevine and felt compelled to reach out. Claire, it read, Ethan didn't just have a failing business. He actively sank it. He embezzled nearly $200,000 from our corporate accounts and funneled it into a private one, then cooked the books to make it look like bad investments. He bankrupted me and left me with the debt. I was too young and too broke to fight him then, but I kept all the records. Every false invoice, every illegal transfer. I've heard you have a good lawyer. Perhaps she can use them. My heart hammered in my chest. This was more than leverage. This was a nuke. This changed everything. Adultery was messy. Financial fraud was a felony. I forwarded the entire chain to Jax. Her reply came back in under 5 minutes. Game over. Cornered, with his finances frozen and the threat of criminal charges looming, Ethan made one last pathetic move. A story appeared on a local gossip blog, citing sources close to the couple. It painted a lurid picture of me as a cold, manipulative shrew who had been plotting for years to ruin her loving husband and fragile sister. It claimed I was mentally unstable, that my sterility revelation was a lie to garner sympathy, and that the entire birthday party was a premeditated trap. It was a clumsy, transparent attempt to poison the well. But they underestimated me. They thought I would be rattled, that I would lash out. They didn't realize I was playing chess while they were still flipping the checkerboard. Jax's office had a cease and desist letter sent to the blog's editor within the hour, threatening a multi-million-dollar defamation suit. The story vanished. On my professional LinkedIn page, I posted a single calm statement. I am grateful for the support of my friends and colleagues during what has become a difficult private matter. I have full faith in the legal process and will not be commenting on false or malicious narratives. My focus remains on my work and the exciting projects ahead. The smear campaign backfired instantly. It made them look desperate and guilty. Staring at my screen, I felt the last flicker of whatever connection I had to them extinguish. They were no longer my family, my antagonists, or even my problem. They were just noise, fading into the distance. A week before the divorce was to be finalized, I agreed to meet Haley. Not for her, and not for my mother who had begged me to, but for myself. I needed to close the book. We met at a nondescript coffee shop halfway between her new, diminished world and my own. The woman who walked in was not the sister I knew. The vibrant, competitive fire in her eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a dull, weary resignation. She was heavily pregnant, her movements slow and labored. She looked broken. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. We sat in silence for a moment. There were 1,000 things I could have said, 1,000 accusations I could have leveled. But looking at her, I felt nothing but a profound sense of distance. Finally she broke. "I was always so jealous of you, Claire," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes and tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "Everything came so easily to you. The grades, the career, Ethan. I just wanted a piece of it. I just wanted to feel like I had one, just once." I took a slow sip of my tea, the warmth a small comfort. "Nothing I have came easily, Haley. I worked for it, built it. The house, the career, the marriage. It was all built. You didn't want to build anything. You just wanted to take what was mine." Her sob was a raw, wounded sound. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've lost everything." I looked at her, not with hatred, but with a stark and final clarity. "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You didn't lose anything. You made a trade. And this is what you got in return." I stood up, leaving a $20 bill on the table. There was nothing more to say. As I walked out into the crisp autumn air, I didn't look back. Driving away from the coffee shop, I had expected to feel a surge of triumph. The final admission, the complete surrender. It should have been a victory. Instead, a quiet emptiness settled over me. I had won. I had utterly demolished them. I saw their ruin laid out before me, and it was a bleak and desolate landscape. The thrill of the initial toast, the cold satisfaction of Jax's legal maneuvers, it had all faded. I realized then that my revenge was never really about destroying them. It was about survival. It was the desperate, violent act of breaking out of a cage. The noise and the fire were just the side effects of my escape. My true victory wasn't their destruction. It was my own quiet, hard-won freedom. The war was over, and all that was left was the silence. The final meeting took place in Jax's corner office, a sterile room of glass and steel overlooking the city. I was dressed in a sharp, tailored navy suit. I felt calm, centered. Ethan was already there when I arrived, sitting opposite Jax's imposing mahogany desk. He looked like a ghost. He had lost weight, and his expensive suit hung on his frame. His tan was gone, replaced by a sickly pallor. He refused to look at me. Jax slid the thick stack of settlement papers across the desk. "It's all there, Ethan," she said, her voice sharp. "Thanks to Mr. Chen's meticulous records, we have indisputable evidence of embezzlement and fraud. You can sign this agreement, which is, I assure you, remarkably generous under the circumstances. Or we can proceed to discovery, and I can hand-deliver my files to the district attorney. The choice is yours." He stared at the papers as if they were his own death warrant. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. With a shaky, defeated scrawl, he signed away the house, the investments, the life he had built on my foundation. Then it was my turn. Jax slid a final document in front of me. Petition to restore former name. I picked up the pen, my hand steady. With a firm, confident stroke, I signed my name. Claire Elizabeth Covington. I was no longer a Cole. The last tie was severed. Ethan stood up and walked out of the room without a word. A stranger I used to know. A year later, the city was celebrating the groundbreaking for the new museum. My project. My triumph. Life moved on. Sometimes I'd get small updates. My father mentioned that Haley had a son. She was still living with our mother, struggling to make ends meet on a part-time salary as a receptionist. Once, I saw her from a distance at the grocery store, looking overwhelmed and exhausted, wrestling with a fussy toddler in a shopping cart. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the produce aisle. There was no anger, no recognition, just the weary glance of two strangers. I turned and walked away. Out of a fleeting curiosity, I searched for Ethan's name online. He had moved to a small town in Oregon. His digital footprint had all but vanished, save for a single profile picture on a networking site. He was working in sales for a lumber company. The charming, ambitious man who had commanded rooms was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and utterly ordinary. Their grand, dramatic saga hadn't ended with a bang. It had simply fizzled out. On the second anniversary of my 30th birthday, I stood on the balcony of my apartment. The city lights glittered below, no longer a backdrop for a life that wasn't mine, but a landscape of my own making. Friends had just left after a small dinner party, real friends who had celebrated my successes and supported me through the fire. I was alone now, a glass of champagne, cool and bubbling, in my hand. I thought of that other party, that other toast, the one that had started a war. It felt like a lifetime ago, a scene from someone else's story. I looked out at the sprawling, brightly lit world before me. There was no more anger, no more grief, no more need for revenge. There was only peace, and a quiet, unshakable sense of self. I raised my glass, not to the past, not to their failure or my victory, but to the future, to the clean lines of my new life, to the silence that was no longer empty, and to the woman who had walked out of the fire and learned how to build a world of her own. To me, I whispered, and I drank. And so, my revenge was complete. But in the end, the quiet peace I found was worth more than their downfall. I rebuilt my life, and I am stronger for it. But now I have a question for you. I chose to walk away and never look back. But what if, a year later, Haley had shown up on my doorstep, baby in her arms, genuinely broken and begging for help? Should I have helped them for the sake of my innocent nephew? Or was locking that door forever the only way to protect my own hard-won freedom? There are two paths. Forgiveness or self-preservation? Tell me which one you would have chosen in the comments below. I want to read every single opinion. And if you believe I made the right choice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories.